My stepdaughter said, "You'll never measure up to my dad, no matter how hard you try." So I shut off her cards, canceled every loan under my name, and walked out. Now she's the one left catching up to the bills. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. When I married Laura, I wasn't chasing romance. I was chasing a structure, something stable, something resembling a life. I'd spent too many years in rented apartments that smelled like other men's cooking. Too many mornings waking up alone to coffee gone cold. Laura had a daughter, Mia, 10 years old then, small for her age, with a kind of intelligence that didn't smile much. She met me with a handshake. Not a hug, not even a polite wave. A handshake like she was doing business with me. Her mother laughed. Embarrassed, but I respected it. There was something honest in the way Mia looked at me. Cautious, direct. She had already learned that people leave, and she wasn't going to hand out trust like candy. Her father, Adam, was a ghost who drifted in and out of their lives. Every few months he'd reappear with a car full of promises. Weekend trips, tickets, glittering gifts that never seemed to come from love, only from guilt. Then he'd vanish again. I never spoke badly about him. I didn't need to. His absences did the work for me. In those early years, I tried to build something steady for her. A pattern, a rhythm. I drove her to school, packed her lunches, and kept my tone even when she tested boundaries. When she fell from her bike, I was the one who carried her home, her knee bleeding through the bandage. When the principal called because she'd pushed another girl for mocking her last name, I was the one who sat across from her and said, "Defending yourself doesn't make you bad, but you can't turn anger into armor forever." She looked up at me with those brown eyes, skeptical. "That's easy for you to say. You don't get left behind." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Children recognize silence as truth more than words. Years passed. Slowly, something softened. She started leaving her school drawings on my desk. At dinner, she'd tell me about her teachers, her friends, her grades. Once, she called me from school just to say she'd gotten an A on a science project. Her voice carried excitement, pride, and in that moment, something inside me clicked. I wasn't a replacement. I was a constant. Laura saw it too. She'd place her hand on mine at night and whisper, "You're good for her, for both of us." And I believed her. I began saving for Mia's future. Quietly, privately, without asking anyone's permission. I wanted her to have options. A life without the financial chains that had defined my own youth. Every paycheck, I'd set aside a small amount in a separate account labeled Mia's Tomorrow. We started touring colleges when she was 16. I remember one campus vividly. The brick buildings glowing under autumn light. The smell of roasted chestnuts from a nearby cart. Mia walked ahead, pointing out art studios, her hair blowing in the wind. She looked back at me and smiled. Not the polite smile of a child tolerating a parent, but the genuine, full one that said, "You're part of this dream too." We talked about majors, about dorm rooms, about the cost of textbooks. I promised her I'd make sure she wouldn't start life in debt. She squeezed my arm and said, "You don't have to, but thank you." Felt like validation. Felt like fatherhood. But peace in families like ours is fragile. One gust of wind, and the cracks reappear. It started subtly. A text on her phone that made her face light up. A new pair of sneakers she said Dad had sent. I didn't comment. People change. Maybe Adam was trying. Then he started showing up again at school concerts, birthday dinners, graduation events. He'd sit near the front, loud, confident, radiating the charm of someone who'd never stayed long enough to be resented. I remember one night after her choir recital. Adam showed up late, cologne strong enough to fill the hallway. He clapped her on the shoulder and said, "That's my girl. You've got your old man's voice." She laughed. Not the soft laugh she gave me, but something sharper, more eager to please. Laura stood beside me, smiling tightly, pretending it was normal. I drove us home that night in silence. Mia sat in the back seat, texting, giggling at something. When we stopped at a light, I glanced in the mirror. Her face was glowing, the kind of glow children get when they've been seen by the person they've been waiting for. "He's really trying this time," she said suddenly. "He said he wants to help with college." I nodded, eyes on the road. "That's good. He should." She hesitated. "He said he feels bad for missing so much. People always feel bad when it's too late." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes lifted in the mirror. We didn't speak for the rest of the drive. Over the next few months, Adam's presence grew louder. He sent money, bought her a new laptop, even offered to cover whatever she needed. The same man who couldn't remember her birthdays now wanted to play savior. And she wanted to believe him. Children always do. One evening, Laura called me into the living room. "Adam's thinking of contributing to the tuition," she said carefully. "Maybe we can all talk. Coordinate things." "Coordinate?" I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. "He disappears for 10 years and now he gets a seat at the table?" She sighed. "He's her father, Mark." I stared at her. "And what am I?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Mia started calling him Dad again. At first in passing, then deliberately. "Dad said I should apply for scholarships. Dad might come to visit next week." Each time, the word hit like a stone thrown into still water. Small, but with ripples that never stopped. I told myself not to care. I told myself titles didn't define worth. But at night, when I sat alone at my desk, I'd open the folder of financial documents and stare at the totals. 8 years of savings, hours of overtime, missed vacations, sacrifice built into numbers. And for what? Then came the night that changed everything. Mia was 17, nearly 18. We were sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out, tuition breakdowns, grants, living costs. I'd spent the weekend crunching numbers, calling banks, setting up what I thought would be a plan for her future. Laura poured coffee, silent. I could feel the tension under her skin. I started explaining the payment structure, how much we could cover, how much Adam had offered to contribute. Mia glanced at the papers with a detached look, then said quietly, almost politely, "That's something my real parents should decide." It was surgical, the way she said it. No malice, just precision. Laura froze. Her eyes flicked toward me, wide and pleading, as if to say, "Don't react." But inside me something cracked. 8 years of trying. 8 years of holding this fragile balance, of being everything she needed except what she wanted, erased in one sentence. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply set down my pen, folded the papers neatly, and stood up. Mia looked up, confused. I didn't mean, but I think she did. Children always mean what they say when it cuts deepest. "I understand," I said. My voice sounded calm, foreign. "You're right. This is between your real parents." I left the table. I heard Laura whisper my name, but I didn't turn around. That night, I sat at my desk again. The same desk where her drawings once lay, where her college brochures still sat in a neat stack. I opened the bank account labeled Mia's Tomorrow. The numbers glowed in the dark, years of work, a father's quiet devotion. Then I began moving the money back into my name. Each transfer felt like closing a chapter. Each click of confirmation sounded like a heartbeat slowing down. When I was done, I called the bank and canceled the loan application I had co-signed in her name. The woman on the other end asked if I was sure. "Yes," I said. "It's not my responsibility anymore." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint murmur of the TV downstairs. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt absence, the hollow calm that comes when you realize you've been dismissed not by accident, but by design. And as I turned off the desk lamp, the room sank into darkness. The kind of darkness that doesn't frighten you anymore, because it finally matches what's inside. The house was quieter after that night. Not peaceful, just empty in a way that felt deliberate. The air itself seemed to avoid me. Plates clinked softer, footsteps hesitated near my study door, and every conversation that once passed through laughter now ended before it began. Laura tried to fill the void with small talk, but her words hung in the air like moths burning out against light. Mia hardly spoke to me at all. She'd come home from school, drop her bag, and disappear into her room. I'd hear her phone buzzing through the thin walls, her laughter carried down the hall, the kind reserved for someone new, someone forgiven. Probably Adam. Weeks passed like that. I learned the pattern of her silence. I stopped expecting anything from it. Then one evening, Laura said, "We need to talk about the college payments." It was after dinner. She was standing by the sink, drying dishes she didn't need to. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes were searching for something. Maybe a remnant of patience. I nodded. "When?" "Tomorrow night. Over dinner. Adam said he'll join us." The word Adam hung in the air like smoke. I felt it settle in my throat. I said nothing. The next night, the table was set too neatly. Candles, folded napkins, even the good plates we never used. Laura moved through the kitchen like someone performing penance, forcing warmth into every motion. At 7 sharp, the doorbell rang. Mia ran to the door before either of us could move. Her voice was bright, full of that light she used to reserve for me. "Dad!" I heard his laughter before I saw him. Smooth, loud, a man comfortable in his own charm. When he stepped into the room, his cologne hit first, then the smile, wide and practiced. He shook my hand like we were old colleagues, not two men orbiting the same child's life. "Mark," he said, "good to see you. You've really held things down here." I nodded. Someone had to. He either didn't hear the edge in my tone or chose to ignore it. Dinner began like a performance we had all rehearsed too many times. Laura served chicken and rice. Adam told stories about his new business venture. Mia laughed in all the right places. I listened. I watched. I counted the seconds between each of her glances, how many times she looked at him before she remembered I was there. When the plates were half empty and the conversation turned to tuition, I unfolded the papers I'd prepared. My handwriting filled the margins, calculations, deadlines, notes about loan options. "I've spoken to the financial office," I began. "If we combine savings, we can cover most of the first year. I'll handle the upfront deposit." And Mia cut in before I could finish. "That's something my real parents should decide." The sound of it didn't hit like a shout. It landed like a whisper through glass, sharp, clean, final. For a second, no one breathed. Laura's fork froze midair. Adam's smirk faltered, only slightly. Mia didn't look up from her plate. I could have argued. I could have reminded her who had been there, who had driven through snowstorms to get her to auditions, who had stayed up fixing the heater when it broke in January. But the truth was simpler, colder. She had made her choice. I set my pen down and folded the papers neatly, aligning the edges like ritual. "You're right," I said. "It's not my decision." I stood. The chair's legs scraped against the floor, a sound that made Laura flinch. I walked out of the dining room without another word. Behind me, I heard Adam clear his throat, then a soft, confused laugh. "Hey!" She didn't mean it like that, but she did. Children always mean the cruelest things most clearly. In my study, the house noises faded. The voices, the clinking plates, the murmurs of forced conversation. I sat at my desk, opened the laptop, and logged into the bank. The glow of the screen lit the room like a confession booth. The account named Mia's Tomorrow still held everything, years of work, of careful planning. I hovered over the balance, my fingers motionless above the keys. Then I began moving the funds back into my name. Line by line, transaction by transaction. Each confirmation chime sounded like a verdict. When it was done, I opened another window, the loan portal I'd co-signed under her name. I clicked cancel. The progress bar moved slowly, as though even the system hesitated to obey. When the screen finally flashed request confirmed, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stared at the dark window, where my reflection sat beside the faint outline of the backyard lights. There's a strange peace that follows betrayal, not the calm of forgiveness, but the emptiness of acceptance. It's the silence that comes after you've run out of ways to explain yourself. Laura knocked once on the door. "Mark," she said softly, "can we talk?" "Not now." Her voice trembled. "She's just a kid." She didn't mean. She meant it. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. I heard her sigh, the quiet sound of defeat, and footsteps fading down the hall. Later, I heard the faint rhythm of their voices in the living room. Adam's tone was gentle, Laura's uncertain. Mia's laughter returned, softer now, but still there. They were moving on without me, and I realized that I was already gone. I stayed up late that night, sorting through old folders. Photos, report cards, small memories I had kept without really noticing. Her first art award, a concert ticket she'd saved, a note she once left on my desk that said, "Thanks for picking me up, even when I made you late." I held it for a long time, tracing the faded ink with my thumb, before placing it into the shredder. The sound was clean, final. I didn't sleep. I watched the clock instead, each minute another nail sealing the distance between us. At dawn, I went outside. The sky was colorless, a flat gray that blurred the horizon. I stood in the yard, barefoot, the air cold against my skin. The world felt suspended, like even nature was waiting for me to decide who I was without her. That's when Laura came out, wrapped in her robe, eyes swollen from tears. "She went to bed crying," she said. "She'll be fine," I replied. "She doesn't understand what she said. Then she'll learn." She looked at me for a long time, as if trying to find the man she'd married inside the one standing before her. "You can't just pull away, Mark. She needs you." "No," I said. "She needs a father." And she made it clear who that is. Laura's mouth trembled. "Adam won't keep his word. You know he won't." "I know," I said. "But she doesn't. And she has to learn what it costs to believe in ghosts." Laura turned away, whispering, "You're punishing her." I didn't answer, because it wasn't punishment, it was truth. That day, I began moving out pieces of myself. Quietly, methodically, I took my framed photos off the wall, one by one, packed my things from the garage, left the savings book in my drawer, empty now but symbolic enough. When Mia came downstairs that morning, her eyes were puffy, her face pale. She didn't speak to me. She just looked, a mixture of confusion and resentment, as if waiting for me to apologize. I poured my coffee, took my keys, and left without a word. Driving to work, the road looked different, clearer somehow. Every turn felt lighter, every breath unburdened by expectation. I had been trying to build a family, but all I'd built was dependence. And now, by removing my part, I was watching the structure reveal what it truly was: hollow. That evening, I came home to find the dining table empty except for one folded note. It was from Laura, just a few lines, written in her delicate, looping hand. "She's scared. She says she didn't mean to hurt you. I'm asking you, please, don't make decisions you can't take back." I folded the note once and placed it inside the same drawer where Mia's tomorrow once lived. Then I closed it. Decisions, I thought, were all I had left. I had imagined silence would bring peace. I was wrong. Silence only sharpened the edges of the house. Every sound carried farther now. The clink of a cup, the slam of a door, the faint echo of a conversation cut short when I entered the room. Laura moved through the house like someone walking through broken glass, careful not to make me bleed again. Mia avoided me altogether. Her footsteps would pause outside my study, then retreat. Even the dog seemed to sense that something unspoken and heavy had settled between us. For a few days, I believed that distance was enough, that boundaries could teach what love could not. But boundaries, I learned, only matter when people notice them. The first call from the college came 3 weeks later. I let it ring out, then another. Then a letter arrived, thin, official, indifferent. Tuition balance overdue. I placed it on the kitchen counter where everyone could see it. No one mentioned it for 2 days. On the third night, Laura broke. "They called me," she said, standing in the doorway while I finished dinner alone. "The college. They said payments stopped." "I know," I said. She stared at me, eyes wide with disbelief. "You, Mark, what are you doing? You can't just." "I already did." Her voice rose. "This isn't just about money. You're sabotaging her future." I set my fork down carefully. Her future was never mine to build. remember? Her real parents should decide. Laura flinched at the words. For a long time she said nothing, then whispered, "You're cruel." I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. Cruel is being erased from your own life. She left the room. The argument ended not with shouting, but with the sound of a door closing gently, as if she still hoped gentleness might fix what honesty had shattered. That night I heard muffled crying through the walls. I didn't go to her room. Couldn't. There are moments when comfort becomes hypocrisy, and I had reached mine. 2 days later, Adam called. I didn't answer the first time. The second time I did. "Mark, what the hell's going on?" His voice was oily, defensive. "Mia says you canceled the payments." I did. "Why?" "Because I'm not her father." He exhaled sharply, as if I had insulted him. "Come on, man. Don't make this about ego. We can work something out. Split the cost, whatever." "You had 18 years to work something out," I said quietly. "You only showed up when the bills were paid." He went silent for a beat, then muttered, "You're punishing her for my mistakes." "No," I said. "I'm finally giving you the chance to make one right." I hung up before he could answer. After that, the collapse came quickly. Mia's tuition account defaulted. Her dorm access was frozen. The car insurance I'd been paying quietly for 2 years expired overnight. The life she'd taken for granted began to dissolve in small, humiliating fragments. Emails, letters, locked doors. She came to my door the following Friday. It was raining, the kind of gray drizzle that makes everything feel heavier than it should. She looked smaller than I remembered, her hoodie soaked, her hands shaking. For a moment I thought she was just cold. Then she spoke. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't invite her in. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "I'm not doing anything." I stopped doing. Her eyes were red, her voice raw. "You promised me college, everything. You said you'd help." "I did," I said. "When you were my daughter." She blinked, stunned. "I am your daughter." "No," I said softly. "You're Adam's. You made that clear." Tears welled up, spilling down her cheeks. "He doesn't have the money. He said he would, but he lied again. He always lies." Her voice cracked on the last word, the confession of a truth she had tried too long to deny. "I know," I said. "That's what makes this lesson real." She shook her head, furious now. "You're ruining everything. You're supposed to be the adult." "I am," I said. "Adults stop paying for people who don't respect them." Her face twisted in grief and disbelief. "So that's it? 8 years. And you just cut me off." I didn't answer. She turned and walked away, the sound of her sobs fading down the hall. Later, Laura came to me. She didn't knock. She just stood in the doorway, pale, trembling, her eyes rimmed with red. "He's gone again," she whispered. I looked up from the papers I was sorting. "Adam?" She nodded. "He promised to fix it, said he'd send the money this week, but now he's not answering. Mia's devastated. She'll survive. She won't forgive you." "I'm not asking her to." Laura stared at me like she didn't recognize the man she'd married. "You used to care about her more than anything." "I still do," I said. "That's why I stopped." She frowned, confused. "That doesn't make sense." "It will," I said. "When she learns that love isn't a credit line." For a moment she looked like she might argue, but then she just nodded weakly and left. I heard her crying in the kitchen later, the kind of crying people do when they finally understand they've been living off borrowed grace. Mia moved out 2 weeks later. She didn't tell me where she was going. She packed her things quietly, her mother helping, both of them pretending this was temporary. I watched from the porch as they loaded the car, boxes, bags, the framed photos I once took of us at the lake. She never looked back. The house felt cavernous after that. Empty rooms, half-lit corridors, echoes of what used to be laughter. But I didn't fill the silence. I let it settle. Sometimes, at night, I'd walk past her room and see the faint outline of where her posters used to hang. Small rectangles of untouched paint. Ghosts of a childhood I had helped build. I wondered if she'd ever remember it kindly, or if I'd just become another shadow in the long list of men who disappointed her. Weeks turned into months. I heard through Laura that Mia had taken a part-time job at a bookstore, that she was renting a tiny apartment near campus with 3 roommates. She'd postponed enrollment, planned to reapply next semester. She was learning, finally, what effort cost. Laura softened toward me eventually, though something between us had cracked beyond repair. We still shared dinners sometimes, quiet ones, careful ones. She stopped defending Adam. She stopped saying his name at all. One night, she said quietly, "You were right. I didn't ask what she meant. Some truths don't need to be repeated." In the evenings, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, the same place where everything had broken. I'd spread out the bills, the letters, the remnants of that old savings account. I no longer felt anger, only an odd kind of relief. The exhaustion that had lived in me for years was finally gone. The house, the money, even the silence, they were all mine again. But peace isn't the same as victory. It's just the absence of battle. I thought about calling Mia sometimes, then stopped myself. Every lesson worth learning has to hurt. If I stepped in now, the meaning would vanish. She needed to face what love looked like when it stopped being convenient. Months later, Laura told me Mia had come by the house while I was at work. She dropped off a box. Old photos, school projects, the remnants of her childhood that she didn't want to carry anymore. Inside, there was a note. Said only, "I get it now. You were the only one who ever showed up." No apology, no plea, just acknowledgement. I folded the note and placed it beside my ledger. It felt heavier than it should have, as if the ink itself carried the weight of all those lost years. That night, for the first time, I slept without guilt. Because guilt belongs to those who abandon others. I hadn't abandoned her. I had simply stopped pretending that unconditional love should come without respect. It took almost a year before I saw her again. A year of quiet mornings, untouched rooms, and the slow realization that peace doesn't arrive like forgiveness. It creeps in like dust, settling over everything you've stopped trying to fix. Mia had gone to college after all. Not the school we planned, but one she could afford. She worked part-time at a cafe near campus. I learned these things not from her, but from Laura, who still carried her name in every conversation like a bruise she couldn't hide. We weren't separated, not officially, but something inside our marriage had already dissolved. We coexisted like neighbors sharing a hallway, polite, distant, unremarkable. I spent most evenings alone. The house became a museum of effort. Pictures on the walls, furniture I'd built, repairs I'd made, all testaments to the man I used to be. Sometimes, I'd walk through it like a stranger, tracing the grooves on the banister I'd sanded smooth for her small hands years ago. The echo of her laughter still lingered in certain corners, faint but stubborn, like it refused to leave entirely. When I thought of her, I didn't feel anger anymore, only the dull ache of clarity. Love had made me blind, and respect had taught me to see again. Then, one Saturday afternoon, she came back. No warning, no call. I was outside trimming the hedge when I saw her car pull into the driveway. It wasn't the old one I'd helped her buy. It was smaller, used, the kind people own when they've started paying their own way. She stepped out slowly, cautious, like she was approaching sacred ground. I hadn't seen her in almost 12 months, but time hadn't taken her youth. It had just carved understanding into her face. She looked older, not in years but in awareness. The child who once judged me was gone. The woman standing before me had been through something that only struggle could teach. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey," I replied, setting the shears down. There was a long silence, the kind that feels heavier than anger. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She held it out to me with both hands, as though it might shatter if handled wrong. "What's this?" "Just something I wanted you to have." I took it. Inside was a photo, her, standing in front of her college dorm, holding a stack of books, smiling. In the corner, someone had scribbled a note in pen. "Paid for by me." I looked at the picture, then at her. "You did it." She nodded. "Yeah, it wasn't easy." Her voice faltered slightly. "But I wanted to show you that I could." There was no pride in her tone, just quiet honesty. She wasn't seeking approval. She was offering truth. "I'm proud of you," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth after so long. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that remembers old warmth but doesn't expect it to return. "I just wanted you to know. I couldn't have done it without you." I frowned. "I didn't help." She shook her head. "You did. You taught me to stop waiting for people who won't show up. That's what you meant, right? That no one's coming unless you carry yourself." I stared at her, surprised by the weight of her words. She had understood more than I'd ever hoped she would. She looked down at the photo still in my hands. "I know what I said before about real parents. I didn't mean it, not the way it came out. I wanted to tell her that I'd forgiven her long ago, but forgiveness didn't feel right. Forgiveness implies the wound closes. Some wounds are meant to stay visible. Instead, I said, "We all say things we don't understand until life explains them for us." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I get it now." We stood in silence, the wind moving softly through the yard. For a moment, the distance between us didn't feel cruel. It felt necessary, like space given to a scar so it can heal without tearing open again. Then she stepped closer, hesitant but certain, and reached out. I thought she might hug me, but she didn't. She just placed her hand on my arm, gentle, deliberate. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not saving me." Her words sank deep. She didn't mean it as a challenge. She meant it as gratitude, from someone who had finally learned that rescue isn't always love, and sometimes love is the refusal to rescue. She turned to leave, and I didn't stop her. Some goodbyes aren't meant to be resisted. Before she got into her car, she looked back one last time. "I don't call him Dad anymore," she said softly. "I just thought you should know." Then she drove away. The dust from the driveway hung in the air long after the car was gone. I stood there for a while, the photo still in my hand. Her handwriting stared back at me, those 4 words, "paid for by me." I went inside, opened my old filing drawer, and found the folder where her college fund used to be. Inside were the old loan papers, bank statements, reminders of every sacrifice I once made. I slipped the photo in beside them, closed the drawer, and locked it. Not out of bitterness, out of symmetry. A record of what was given and what was learned. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and poured myself a drink. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. Felt concluded. There's a certain kind of peace that doesn't come from healing. It comes from finality. From knowing you've said everything that needed saying, even if it was said in silence. Laura came in a little later. She saw the photo on the counter and picked it up. Her eyes softened. "She's doing well." "She is. She said you talked." I nodded. "For a bit." "She looked lighter," Laura said, as if she couldn't believe it herself. "I think she finally understands. Maybe we all do." We didn't speak for a while after that. She poured herself a glass of water, sat across from me, and stared at the faint scratches on the table. The same ones Mia had made years ago with her homework pencils. Every mark on that wood was a story, every dent a reminder. Families don't vanish, they stain. After a long silence, Laura whispered, "Do you ever regret it?" I took a slow sip. "Regret what?" "Pulling back. The money, the distance. Everything." I looked at her carefully. "No. I regret how long it took me to do it." She nodded, quietly crying into her glass. I didn't reach for her. Some comforts only reopen old wounds. Later, when she went to bed, I stayed behind, staring at the photo again. I realized then that Mia's words, "You taught me to stop waiting," were the closest thing to love I'd ever received from her. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was what fatherhood really was, not being adored, but being remembered for the lessons that hurt. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The night was deep, still, indifferent. I thought about the years I'd spent building something that wasn't mine to keep, about the girl who'd grown into herself through the absence I'd created, and about the woman upstairs who still slept beside a ghost of a man she used to know. I finished my drink and whispered to the empty room, not as a confession, but as a verdict. I did what I had to. The house didn't answer. It never does. Before going to bed, I placed the photo on the shelf where the family portraits once stood. Not to replace them, just to mark the ending properly. The picture sat there in its envelope, plain and small, but it carried more truth than any framed memory before it. Because sometimes, love isn't about holding on. It's about letting someone live in the space your absence creates. And sometimes, the hardest thing a father can do is nothing. So tell me, was I wrong to let her learn the cost of her choices? Or was I finally right to make her earn what I once gave for free?